plan and to talk to the sexual harassment policy as it is within the Department of Social Development. There is a lot of work that has been done, but without further ado, I'd like to cut to the chase and open the floor, Chairperson. So thank you very much for the opportunity for us to come and share what is happening in social development. Thank you.
Great pleasure, Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister and Chairperson. We've got two presentations today. The first will be presented by Ms. Ramula Patel, who is going to present on the department's sexual harassment policy, and the other one is on the GBV NSP implementation plan for the province. We haven't done a separate policy or presentation on the department's GBV policy, since that's contained as well within the provincial implementation plan. I'm not sure which order they're supposed to go in, if there's a preference, otherwise we'll just get started. Okay, then I'll hand over to Ms. Patel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, honourable members and Chair. I'm going to kick straight into the sexual harassment policy. So by way of background, the sexual harassment policy was consulted way back in 2011 between the employer and trade unions and was signed off in that year. It's also the transversal policy that is applied and used across the provincial government of the Western Cape. Just a little bit of background in terms of what sexual harassment is and how it is applied within the department. So sexual harassment is unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature that violates the rights of a human being. So there are various factors that we take into consideration in determining whether the conduct constitutes sexual harassment or not. And these include whether the conduct is prohibited on the grounds of sex and or gender and or sexual orientation, whether the sexual conduct was in fact welcomed or unwelcomed, the nature and extent of the sexual conduct, and importantly, the impact of the sexual conduct on the complainant. Now, sexual conduct will become sexual harassment if the recipient has made it clear that this kind of behavior is considered to be offensive. Alternatively, where the perpetrator should have known that this conduct is unacceptable. It can occur where there is a single act of sexual harassment or where the behavior is persistent. The important thing to remember with sexual harassment is that it doesn't come down to the intention of the perpetrator, but it's about how the complainant feels and experiences the conduct. So that's an important distinction to bear in mind. Going on to the structures within DSD in terms of how to deal with and report sexual harassment. In terms of the policy, we've appointed sexual harassment officers. We have one in the head office. We have some in the regions as well. They've also been trained, have the requisite skills and experience in order to deal with matters of this nature. We also have communication campaigns. If you walk through our offices, you'll see our posters are up all over the show where our staff generally have access to the details of the sexual harassment officers are freely available. And we also have communication from time to time on the issue by way of news flashes besides the posters that we have. Then also to note that our sexual harassment officer from head office also will, as and when is required, will provide guidance and advice to the other sexual harassment officers that are in the regions. When somebody experiences sexual harassment, generally your port of call would be your harassment officer. So the duty of the harassment officer generally would be to try to place the person at ease, because, you know, naturally there might be trauma that is attached to what the person has experienced. And then also to explain the person's rights to them, and also to establish how they would prefer the matter to be dealt with, whether they want the matter to be dealt with formally or informally. And then also, importantly, if there's a need for counseling, to make the necessary arrangements for the victim to receive those services. Generally, the options, as I've indicated, that it will be explained to the victim, is formal or informal. Informal means that the person then has elected for the contact officer, the harassment officer, to call the perp into a meeting. The victim may decide she wants to be present at this meeting or not. The purpose of the meeting would really be to establish what the behavior, to establish that the behavior that the victim has experienced is unacceptable, to help the perpetrator understand that his conduct is unacceptable, to also go through the policy with that perpetrator, give them a copy of the policy, and then consider the matter to be finalized if that is appropriate, depending on what happens during that meeting. Alternatively, as I've indicated, the victim will decide formal or informal. However, there are certain instances where the nature and extent of the conduct is so serious that it will have to be dealt with formally. And so you will make a decision based on what has happened. You know, the employer has an obligation to create a safe working environment. And so you may decide, look, for example, if the nature of the is rape, to deal with it informally would be entirely inappropriate. You need to not only protect the complainant, but you need to protect your other staff and possibly service providers from this kind of behavior. And so you would deal with it formally. So when one deals with it formally, you will consider whether or not you want to suspend the employee, and then the applicable rules and considerations in terms of suspension will be taken into account. Also, then, when we deal with matters formally, in terms of the agreement that we have with .P, the matter is then referred to the Directorate of Employee Relations at .P. They will investigate the matter, and depending on the outcome, will deal with the matter appropriately. I think then I've covered everything that I want to cover. Thank you, honourable members. Thank you, Chair.
Will you take a round of questions between the
Yeah, I
presentations?
think let's do that. Maybe there's a comment or two to be made by the members. Please, Member Ricardo.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you for the explanation. I just got one or two questions. One is transversal across departments, I presume. And then second, does it also applicable to the NGOs and to your suppliers and those individuals that work with you, that you subcontract for services, and how are they legally bound? And the other one is, does it cover the power dynamics? Does this policy include the power dynamics between a junior manager and a senior manager? And then the level of the harassment officer, what level is that in the department? And what sort of training does that harassment officer get? And then my last point is, I'm not sure if I misheard you, on the informal process, you indicated that a victim and the perpetrator gets called into a room. What is the counseling services provided post that process? Say, for example, victim says, you know, I'm extremely unhappy about this untoward behavior. The WhatsApps or the emails has been completely inappropriate. And the perpetrator then says, well, actually, I didn't mean it that way, blah, 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 blah. And the victim still feels a bit of grief, but it's the informal process, not the formal process. Because you said it was closed. I just want to get an understanding. What does it mean? doesn't mean that the victim still walks away feel aggrieved, but in your books is closed, and does the victim then get further support in that? I'm just trying to get an understanding there. Thank you, Chairperson.
I think let us deal with that one first. Quite a couple of issues.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions, Honourable Member. So yes, indeed, the policy is a transversal one and it's applied across all the 13 departments. The policy is in fact applicable to service providers as well. So they would be bound by the policy. It is provided for here. In terms of the power dynamics, the policy does in fact speak to quid pro quo forms of sexual harassment, which would entail, as you had indicated, where there's a power dynamic where somebody in a senior position might seek to elicit sexual favors in order to, for some benefit to accrue to the victim. So it is fairly comprehensive. It deals with all of those types of sexual harassment, and it is dealt with as and when required. In terms of the level and the training, I can say that our Chief Director present here is in fact one of our harassment officers. So it's not only about the level of the person, but it's also about the requisite skill and experience that you need. You must bear in mind that when a victim comes to you, you must, it's not just about whether I'm a chief director or not, is do I have the skill and the requisite emotional intelligence and experience to deal with this person who is before me, to set them at ease, to make them feel comfortable, to help them understand that this process is a confidential one, to guide them through what they would need in order to feel safe in those circumstances. So it's a myriad of factors that we take into account when we appoint a harassment officer. So it's not just limited to, but as to your level, but as I've indicated, we've got Marion Johnson here, who is in fact a chief director, who is one of our harassment officers. Then in terms of the informal process, our counselling isn't a one-off. It would depend on what you need. So the process, the support that we provide to a victim doesn't end when we finalize the informal process. It would depend on what you need. And so it's up to the victim also. We will give them options and they will decide what it is that they need, and we will then facilitate that for them. So it's not a question of, oh, so we've dealt with the process. The perpetrator has now acknowledged wrongdoing. He's indicated he's never going to do this again, and then people walk away. There's provision made in the policy also importantly for the alleged perpetrator to go for counselling. You know, sometimes we all know that part of the psychology of a perpetrator is somebody who may have been abused in his own life at some point. So we deal with those issues as well. We take a holistic approach to this. So it's not a matter of just following process. It's the approach that is taken is to ensure that the conduct is never repeated, that the victim feels safe, and that importantly, we create a safe working environment, not only for all our staff, but for people who would be engaging with us. Honourable Member, I hope that I've covered all your questions.
Okay, you just want to
Yeah.
follow up, sorry.
Yeah, just to follow up on the reporting line, if you can just share those details with us as well. Because I wrote here, you said the reporting line. Is that a telephone line or something, or where people report it internally, or how does it work?
Oh, okay. So we have contact details for all our contact officers. So it's a direct line to them. Alternatively, you can contact your supervisor, or you can directly to our HOD if you want. So you have options.
Okay, thank you. Honourable Member Brinkhuis.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, Chair, on this subject of sexual harassment in the DSD, the appointment of the SHO, the sexual harassment officer, when was he or she appointed? And this is the one question. And when he or she was appointed, what was the criteria for the appointment, and what kind of qualifications was looked at when the sexual harassment officer was appointed? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Chairperson. As we mentioned, we do have a number of sexual harassment contact officers. Ms. Johnson is our sexual harassment contact officer for the head office of social development, but it's an existing staff member that's appointed, so it's not someone who's appointed specifically only to do this work. It's a member of staff. But I'll ask Ms. Johnson maybe if she'd like to give us a date when she was appointed, because quite honestly I can't remember.
Honourable Member.
Sorry, Chairperson, if the department can just speak up a little, because
sorry, I'm not close enough to the mic. Apologies.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Through the Chair, I think I was appointed in 2012, and at that stage was the only sexual harassment officer in the department, because sometimes our district offices are far-flung. We thought it was later on over the years, thought it best to actually also appoint people in each office. And they would discuss with me if they have issues or if they don't want to handle something, then I would do it. And we also, because of our facilities, we've also appointed somebody for the facility staff as well. They get together once a year. I mean, pre-COVID, it was on an annual basis. We'd also bring in people from .P, or we'd get a service provider to provide updates and training as well. Qualifications, I don't know. Since I don't, yeah. Well,
there's no specific qualification required.
Yeah.
Just some levels of competency, trust, and
Yeah.
experience.
Yes.
And the people with the necessary know-how
Yes.
when he or she receives such a complaint.
And it's a
What to know,
yeah.
what to do immediately with such a complaint.
And it's voluntary through the
Yeah.
Chair. It's
Just a follow-up, Honourable Member, yes.
Thank you very much, Chair. As a follow-up, yes, I'm sure that a case like a sexual harassment case is a very sensitive case, so psychology will play a very detrimental part of handling such a case. So, if I could just get the sense of understanding of, you know, that what type of background does that sexual harassment officer have in terms of psychology and in terms of those kind of studies and qualifications.
Before you, Honourable Minister, I think just to divide the two issues, the first port of call is the reporting side to a sexual harassment officer. Now that person doing the necessary reporting will not necessarily be the person to take the process forward, as the Honourable Mrs. Patel have explained. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chair. I hear the question. It is around a level of maturity, but I also want to indicate that sometimes seniority could actually be a barrier for people who wish to report. But I would like our Chief Director Johnson, who is a senior official, to give you an indication of her qualifications, if that will set your mind at ease, because the other harassment officers normally would feed into head office, and she, together with Ms. Patel, would provide the necessary support and guidance and ensure training. So, Ms. Johnson, if you don't mind sharing your qualifications, please.
Yeah, I've got a master's degree in public health and a master's degree in public administration and a lower honors degree in psychology. If that hopefully is.
No, thank you for that. But I just want to caution the honourable members to find someone with such qualifications as a reporting mechanism might be very, very difficult. That is why I want to revert back to my earlier point. The competency, your who you are, how trustworthy you are. You're an adult. You can use your common sense, and you will have to know what to do with that information to take it to a different level. And at that different level, the competent people, the learned people will take over and take the process out of us. And Minister, am I correct? Mrs. Johnson, am I correct?
Yes, Chair. Also, most of the sexual harassment officers are all qualified social workers. And a lot of our social workers also have higher degree qualifications. So in terms of that, I hope it sets your mind at rest.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Ahmed, actually, I mustn't call you on your first name. I must say, honorable member, are you satisfied? Are you okay?
No, thank you very much, Chair. I'm satisfied.
Thank you so much. Honorable member Windvogel, please.
Thank you, Chair. My sincere apologies for being late.
We receive your...
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'm not sure. Are we dealing with the gender-based violence implementation plan?
Yes.
Okay.
You unfortunately, you were late for that.
Okay. Okay. Chair, mine, it's so wonderful to hear the type of qualifications that we have in the department. But it's so a pity that nasty things is happening, specifically in this department and safety. We have been waiting for feedback, and I'm happy to see the HOD here. Feedback on the requested committee meeting for the HOD to account. Before me going into the presentation, I want you to give me this 1 second to just say these 2 words. To account for MEC Fritz sexual misconduct. A lot of these occurred during his time in the department. When I just want to check, while we have the minister and the HOD, when is this meeting going to happen, when there was a request for such meeting? But nevertheless, Chairperson, I want to go to slide 2 on the presentation. Given the prevalence of GBV in the province and the insufficient funding for victim empowerment in the province, what does the GBV plan say about increasing the funding for GBV? And then secondly, Chair, what are the latest figures, seeing that a lot of reported figures are pre-2020? And then what is the response strategy for the 8 to 10 stations that reported sexual assault that are in the Western Cape? Thank you, Chairperson.
Good. Yeah. Thank you, lady.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I see that Ms. Corson would like to address some of the questions. The question on when we will appear regarding the question about the issue the members mentioned now, I can't answer that. I think that would be for the committee chairperson to answer, but we are available and willing to...
Sorry, Chair, I can't hear.
Sorry, ma'am. This chair is so far back. I must move this chair forward a bit. Sorry, Minister.
Oops. When you answer, you will have to sit a little bit forward.
I'm sitting on the edge of the seat already. I'm going to fall off if I get any further forward. Thank you, Chairperson. The question about the slide 2 on the presentation and the funding for victim empowerment services. I think, is that what Ms. Corson wanted to speak to? Okay, you can go ahead, Ms. Corson.
Thank you, Chair. Remember, we are going to still do the GBV presentation. I don't know. I think you misunderstood the Chair. So I can answer that. I think during the budget speech, you were informed about the budget cuts that the department had to do in this new financial year. GBV was not subject to that because of the importance of that program. Not that it's choosing sides, but regarding that, in terms of the implementation plan, each and every department that has an outcome to be delivered in the implementation plan, to include that in their departmental budgets.
Okay, thank you, lady. May I ask Honorable Wendy Philander, please?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, I welcome the presentation by the department this morning, and one can really see from this presentation that the department does go a long way, or to a great extent, to address these matters, Chairperson. Chair, it is also for the department, I would think, for them to constantly assert and alert themselves in terms of the different components within the area of the scope of what we are addressing this morning. And then also, Chairperson, whilst the department are managing, I mean, as a member of society, we also have an obligation. And my question would then just be, although the department assigned budget, the department put various measures in place in order to curb this unwelcome conduct within society itself and the department. What especially the minister, in terms of a proactive approach, what would she think with the desired budget attached to it? What would actually be the ideal working environment, not just to curb, but to establish an anti-harassment working environment? How would that be possible, and how would that be anticipated within the department? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member Philander.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the member for the question. I'm going to talk to the issue of budget, which we've all discussed in the debate. At present, I, together with Dr. Robert MacDonald, we lead a gender-based violence transversal work stream meeting once a month. And at this meeting, all 13 departments, government departments, are represented, in that they have champions, GBV champions, that have voluntarily stepped up to be a part of this forum. It was, in fact, the members of the forum had formed a steering committee, and they actually completed the GBV implementation plan as it came down from national, based on the 6 pillars. We also engaged in and this is something that was done through the ministry, a series of webinars called Courageous Conversations. It is done on a quarterly basis, and the Courageous Conversation, the gender-based violence team met yesterday, where HOD David Savage and Malvin from Health presented on gender responsive budgeting. So we cover various topics. We've had Colonel Taswell Paulson talk to GBV from a SAPS perspective, because he leads gender-based violence at SAPS. We've had advocates and attorneys guide us on the legislation. So that is a forum that creates awareness, and we also use that forum to talk to the activities in government. So on this coming Friday, we will be hosting the 3rd of the Courageous Conversations, where we will have HOD Savage, we'll have Pregs, I think it's Pregs Governor, when we're going to be talking to gender responsive budgeting. So we are not looking at GBV in isolation. We are looking at we are looking at it holistically, so that we don't have gaps in the system. For me, what is important in the department, and when I get into the lift, we have sufficient awareness. There are pamphlets, or there's displayed all over the place. I think what's important is just to understand that often harassment doesn't necessarily happen in your face. It is sometimes covert, and covert as in overt. And this is why it is so important that there be a level of trust in any department. And I certainly would like to believe that I engage transparently with the team. We keep everyone updated. And Ms. Horson will also alert that we have a VEP program, which meets, the VP meeting is a quarterly meeting, and that is where all stakeholders, SAPS, the NPA, Justice, everybody's in the room, including health and all the other departments. So we are working on a whole of government approach, transversal approach to this. The sexual harassment policy is also under review at the moment, because as you would have heard in Ms. Patal's opening remarks, it was last looked at in 2011, and that is a piece of work that is being attended to. I also need to, in the interest of transparency, a lot of the work is done in CSC, which is in the Department of the Premier. So if we record any cases, it gets managed in the department and then it gets referred to CSC, where they will in turn take the matter further. So I think for me, it's about creating a safe space where people feel trusted. And I think we might have had 15 or 16 monthly GBV forum meetings, and that has certainly given people space and room to want to speak and to know that this is a safe space we are trying to create. And that, of course, we are driving that together with our culture journey change, which addresses all the very issues that are prevalent in society at the moment. I will hand to Dr. McDonald to talk to the question on the 8 GBV hotspots, but I can say that that fits in with the area-based teams, and our department plays a critical role there. So I'll leave that to the people who are directly involved in that process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think that also to say that to create a environment, an anti-harassment environment where that's a culture, it's an ongoing process of maintaining that culture. You can't sort of build it and then leave it. It has to be maintained and constantly, the message constantly needs to be driven home. The fact that we have an enforcement approach to sexual harassment matters is one part of that. So we have provided the Parliament with figures on the sexual harassment cases in the department over the last 10 years, as well as details of action taken, and there's been dismissals and so on, where we've had cases that have been confirmed, and that's one aspect, so that the potential perpetrators know that there will be consequences, that it's not acceptable, but also that the messaging is there, as the Minister's mentioned. We are constantly having awareness and campaigns around that. We're also now looking at introducing awareness among new recruits and interns around their rights when it comes to sexual harassment and those things. And then also we are being led from the front by the Premier and the measures that he's also has undertaken to introduce to improve the sexual harassment policies and reporting procedures, so that everyone is aware that this is unacceptable. But that kind of thing has to continue. It's not something that you do once and then it's done, because it's a culture that has to be maintained.
Honourable Wendy, you're happy with the answers so far?
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you. There's more hands. Honourable Brinkhuis.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Yes, on the subject of sexual harassment, I'm sure that the process that is followed by the sexual harassment officer, it is very it covers most aspects in such a sexual harassment case. But to the department, if they can give us a more detail about how does the process actually transpire and how it unfolds in terms of when a complainant comes forward with such allegations, and is the object of that process, is it actually is it a fact-finding process, or is it more, should I say, is it more a counseling process to counsel the complainant and like in this case now the aggressor? So that is my question at the moment. If I can get some of the detail, that how does the process actually unfold? Is it a fact-finding process, or is it merely a just to like I've mentioned now before, is it just to counsel? Is it just to counsel the complainant and the aggressor? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll ask Ms. Johnson to give a bit more detail as requested.
It is not a fact-finding process in the sense where one would go and investigate. When a complainant makes contact, then maybe from my own personal perspective, I would find out from the person when they would like to meet, whether I should go to them or whether they would come to me. Because it also depends, unfortunately, because I am a chief director, if I sort of rock up at an office, immediately and I'm not really visiting offices that much, there could be the confidentiality could be breached. So once I see the person, I would first, as I said, talk to them about how they're feeling and elicit what happened from the perspective of the complainant, what they felt, why they felt it was like that, etc. I'd also then just sort of speak to them very broadly around the policy to fundamentally set their minds at ease that they're not imagining things.
Just a moment.
Chair, thank you very much. Chair, I've heard just the input to date that it is a bit, for me, it is a bit conflicting, or it's a bit confusing, because I've heard in the beginning that the director mentioned that it is not a fact-finding process, but then I also heard the director mention that he will inquire from the complainant that what have actually happened. If I can just get some clarity on it. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe Ms. Johnson can continue, and then Ms. Patel will also help, because I think there's two processes.
Yes.
In a sense. There's the process that Ms. Johnson deals with, and then after it potentially goes over to the employee relations side of things. So we'll give detail on how those work together.
Let's listen to the lady first, and then Mrs. Patel. Ms. Johnson,
okay. I think when people think about fact-finding, they think about an investigation process, and I will leave that to Ms. Patel. The policy, what we want is to have an environment where people feel they can come forward. So the complainant comes forward. Or the sexual harassment officer would listen to what the complainant has to say. Now, if you also look at the policy, sexual harassment is how you perceive it. It is how I perceive it. You might not think you're doing something, but I could think this is harassment. If from what the complainant tells the sexual harassment officer, you can get some really gory things coming out. Let me tell you. And you can get what people would consider to be not so gory. The sexual harassment officer would take down the complainant's viewpoint, would then make a call based on what the complainant has said, also after asking the complainant, do you want to follow an informal route or do you want to follow a formal route? We explain the two routes to them. The decision on what route to follow generally lies with the complainant. So the complainant, if the complainant says, I want to follow a formal route, that is, in the parlance of government, a disciplinary route. Then the sexual harassment officer hands everything over to employee relations, and the sexual harassment officer's job stops. Because the person who complained wants to go a particular way. If they choose what is called the informal route, that is the route where they don't want to get the alleged perpetrator in trouble, as it were. They don't feel that the person's behavior is conducive to a working environment or personally to themselves. They're upset with it, but they don't think it should go a disciplinary route, for want of a better word. Then the complainant has the option of either being present, because the complainant will ask the sexual harassment officer to please speak to the person, the alleged perpetrator, and tell them why they think their behavior is inappropriate. The complainant will also, we'd ask them, what do you want to get from this informal process? The complainant will generally will say, I want them to apologize, or I just want them to be aware and not do anything like this again. And the complainant can be present, or the complainant can leave it. A complainant doesn't have to be. Now remember, throughout all this, the complainant is confidential. Theoretically, nobody knows who the complainant is. A meeting is set up with the alleged perpetrator. Fundamentally said, listen, there's been a complaint against you. This is the complaint. The alleged perpetrator would say, oh my Lord, I didn't mean it like that, or whatever. Or a lot of the times, informally, the alleged perpetrator seems very surprised. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen as well. And then that, well, they would say, oh, I'm so sorry, or I'm not sorry. I mean, it's up to them. And that message would be relayed again. So a lot of the times, the alleged perpetrator would also say, look, I don't know who it is, but I could go and say sorry to her, etc. My thing would be, let me find out from the person whether they would actually like you to meet them face to face around this issue. So and that's why it's informal, because it is not, theoretically, it's not a punitive process. Records are kept, but these records cannot be held against the alleged perpetrator, for example. But it is a little bit of a way of providing some form of awareness to somebody that you might act like in that way with people you know or your friends, but in this case, with this complainant, the behavior wasn't welcome. So it's a fine line in terms of how you need to deal with it. But if they go informal, our job stops at the point where the formal process kicks in, and then from Ms. Patel can take it further, but then is when the fact-finding, investigation, etc. proceeds.
Mrs. Patel?
I hope that...
Thank you. You may.
Right, thank you. If I may just explain, so there are two processes. Ms. Johnson has explained the informal process. So there are two instances in which a matter will go to a formal process. The one is where the victim makes that election. She says, I don't want to deal with this. Or he says, I don't want this matter dealt with informally. I need it to be dealt with formally rather. The other instance is where you make a judgment call, where the nature and extent of the sexual harassment is so egregious that it would be inappropriate to deal with it informally. Then you send the matter off to employee relations, and they will then receive the complaint. They will then conduct a full investigation. The investigation will entail, amongst others, a consultation with the victim. It will entail a consultation with witnesses if there are, depending on the nature of the harassment, if there's documentary evidence that they can find. So let's say there were inappropriate emails, WhatsApps, etc. They will source all of that information. If there's video footage that's available, they will source all of that. They will then analyze the information that they've received. They'll draft a report and they'll make a recommendation based on the independent investigation. If the investigation finds that there's sufficient evidence upon which to charge the perpetrator, that process will then follow. An independent chairperson will be appointed in order to chair the disciplinary hearing, and then parties' rights as set out in our disciplinary code will then kick into effect, where the alleged perpetrator is entitled to be represented at the disciplinary hearing. The employer will present their case. The employee has a right to question the evidence of the employer, cross-examine witnesses, also will have the right to present their own case, call their own witnesses, and then the independent chairperson will make a decision as to whether the person is guilty or not. Thereafter, if the person is found guilty, you kick into the second part of the process where you submit mitigating or aggravating circumstances. The chairperson thereafter will, based on a consideration of various criteria such as the nature and extent of the misconduct, the perpetrator's history, the context, the surrounding circumstances, and any other relevant information that the presiding officer deems needs to be taken into consideration, and then we'll issue a sanction. Your sanction can range from anything from counseling to a dismissal to a demotion to a suspension for 3 months without pay, written warning, final written warning. So it really would depend on what the presiding officer, the independent presiding officer, would then deem to be appropriate under the circumstances. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Honourable Mayor, if you have any other questions, we could come back to you later on, but Honourable Binvogel, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm not sure if I missed my question on slide 3.
What is that question on slide 3?
I asked what are the figures currently? Do you have figures currently?
Thank you, Member.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Just a second.
Yeah.
There's a second
Then
one.
secondly, Chair, how many sexual harassment cases have been reported within the department over the past year, and how many people were charged and fired by the department? And then lastly, Chair, I also want to know on slide 4. Let me just get to slide 4. How does this plan address the issue of powerful managers in the provincial government that are facing charges of GBV and sexual harassment who remain in their jobs despite being in court? Thank you, Chairperson.
Ms. Patel, are you worried about that question?
No, apologies, Chair. I didn't hear the last question. If she could repeat, if the honourable member could repeat the last question, thank you.
How does this plan address the issue of powerful managers in the department that are facing charges of GBV and sexual harassment who remain in their jobs despite being in court?
Okay. You will have to decide who's going to answer what.
I'll start, Chair.
One question.
The question around figures, the Department of Health has a system called HECTIS. I'm not sure what that stands for, but it gives live information on GBV figures, as well as other violent crime and trauma. And they gather that information from the trauma wards in the health system. So they do have ongoing updated figures, which can be used to track where the hotspots are. But that information is something that is shared with us through the safety priority in the COVID recovery plan. So that information is made available. I'm sure that it would be available for members as well, but the request would need to go to the Department of Health because they're the custodians of the system and the information. But they're the ones who provide the latest stats on violence, including GBV. The second question about sexual harassment cases reported in the past year in the department, I'm not actually aware of any in the last year. We have provided a parliamentary response with the figures for the last 10 years, and it averages about one a year generally, but we haven't had one in the last year. So I think we have seen a dip in the numbers since the remote working arrangements have been in place because of COVID. So there's been less people in the office. So we do expect there will be less kind of complaints of that nature during this time. In terms of the question about slide 4 and how the policy addresses the managers who are in a position of power, I think Ms. Patel did talk to about how the policy addresses power relations in the workplace, but also the question of managers who are facing charges but remain in their jobs. I think it depends on the nature of the situation. We haven't had that situation where we've had someone who's been charged criminally in a GBV or sexual harassment case that we've had to act on in the context of the workplace. But generally, we are advised that with these matters, it has to be dealt with on its merits. So the severity of the charges and the potential risk that person might pose in the workplace would have to be taken into consideration in any decision that would be taken about what to do with the person. But if someone is facing serious charges, whether it's a senior manager or a junior person, the person would usually be suspended if they're deemed to be a risk to the personnel in the department, particularly the complainant or any victims. But also that there is case law actually that employers have actually been found to be liable, civilly liable, for not taking action against harassers in the workplace. And they were then sued by the victims and successfully sued for not taking action. So it is incumbent on employers to take the necessary action to protect victims of sexual harassment. There is case law on that, and that is our policy as well, that someone would be suspended if they are regarded as a risk to their fellow employees.
Thank you very much, HOD, for those questions. Member Kana?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Chair. Greetings to you and members. I think I just have one or two questions which really might also be sort of like follow-ups. I think the first comment, Chair, that one wants to make is that I think this transversal policy that we rely on is I believe it's outdated, you know, if you check when it was adopted and check also the issue of the rising cases of GBV and the commitments that the government would have made in trying to respond to such. But one question that I want to have, Chair, is because I'm listening and how these two processes are explained, whether it's your informal or your formal process. And I see that it's mainly, you know, focused on the staff of the department. And pardon me, Chair, I want now to understand as to how would it then relate to you, ourselves, who would then become your political principals? How does this policy address incidents that would relate to political principals, understanding that they are not necessarily employees of the department? Is this policy that we have is sufficient enough to ensure that we are able to respond to incidents that are committed by political principals, like what now we have as the incidents that would have happened against former MEC Fritz? And this department is one of the departments that would have also been mentioned as departments, as an area where such incidents would have been committed. The other question that I have is around the issue of the training of the sexual harassment officers. I just want to check, because I see it was also mentioned that the last training they received was in 2019. And I want to understand reasons for that, because I think that would be a long time ago, taking into consideration, of course, the high incidents, the decisions that the government had taken after the high incidents even of 2019 around GBV. And what training do these officers really go through? And also understanding that I think it was mentioned now by the department that in terms of the formal process, you also have, as a SHO, you also have an opportunity of deciding whether a formal process should be followed. And for you to be able to do that, you require some sort of training and consistent training as we get to be alerted of the complexity of dealing with the question of gender-based violence. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I think a number of issues, I leave that one firstly with you before we move on to the other members.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And the first comment about the date of the policy, I think we did mention earlier there's currently a review underway. So that is in place. The question about how the policy relates to political principles, the scope of the policy does include office bearers, according to the document itself. The question about the training for sexual harassment officers and what training do they go through, I think we could ask maybe Ms. Johnson to speak briefly to that. If you'd like to speak to what the training entails. Answer that. Okay, Ms. Patel, you can go.
All right, thank you. So as we've indicated previously, there are various things that we look for before we appoint a sexual harassment officer. So they would need, as a starting point, without any further training, your basic skills around how to deal with a victim, right? But generally the training that is provided would also be around what is contained in the harassment policy. So what are your obligations when you're dealing with a victim? What are your obligations when you're dealing with a perpetrator? And also in terms of understanding sexual harassment, it's such a complex area. You've asked about the power differentials. Not everybody understands that quid pro quo form of sexual harassment is in fact sexual harassment, where somebody in a senior position says to somebody, you have to sleep with me in order to get a job. Some people might think, oh, but that was consensual. It's not really harassment. You got a benefit out of it. You got a promotion and therefore it's okay. So that's the kind of training that we would provide our harassment officers in terms of what does the law say around sexual harassment? What are the risks that you face when you do or don't do something? So as the HOD has already indicated, we've had complainants across the board. I'm not talking public service specifically, but generally, in terms of the legal framework that applies generally to matters of this nature. You've had employees in private companies who've taken their employers to task on the matter where they've received substantial sums in terms of compensation. So these are the things that we alert our harassment officers to in the training that we do in fact provide for them.
Thank you for the detailed answers in that respect. Honourable Member Wendy Philander, please.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, we all know that harassment presents itself in various forms, and harassment speaks to unwanted behavior. Chairperson, we also know, as I said, in different forms, it could be discriminatory, of sexual nature, physical harassment, as well as psychological harassment. Chairperson, my question would just be in terms of the general term of unwanted behavior. And my sincere apologies if I did miss this during the presentation, but also in terms of psychological unwanted behavior, and we all know what negative effect this can have on a person's mental well-being. Chairperson, and also adding to that, bullying in the workplace as well. Chair, is there from the department side currently a mechanism or a procedure where not just reacting when something happens? I also heard previously the departmental representative speaking about consultations. But is that happening once the deed occurred, or is there a endeavor from the department to frequently consult individuals or the working corps, and also perhaps by means of a survey determine whether these practices indeed do take place without someone necessarily loudly blowing a whistle or speaking out, but that they do get those type of information on a frequent basis by consulting and by perhaps a survey? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. More of a statement. Anyone want to give comment to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say thank you to the member. Yes, there are, as far as I know, ongoing sessions. I know that one of our regional officers hosts monthly engagements. We also have GBV social workers that are out there, but I'm certainly not the specialist. I can give the broad brush view, but I think we have Ms. Porter here, who is actually the manager for the VP program. And I think she can tell you a whole lot more. We also work with stakeholders at the same time. So there is ongoing, as far as I know, there is ongoing education and awareness regarding a topic that has become a scourge, not only in this province, but in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it with regards.
Can I just add on that question?
You want to add to that?
Just add to the question because it's linked to what the member is asking. Given what has recently happened, has there been an increase of awareness campaigns? I think that's what the member is trying to find out around gender-based violence, bullying, and sexual harassment. Thanks.
Chairperson, I think the incident in question has been a cause of concern, but I'm also aware that the Department of the Premier has launched a GBV campaign in consultation with DSD, and I actually heard the ad on the radio. So it's definitely an increase in what should be happening is awareness and awareness education, early prevention. And in the second presentation, when we talk to the GBV implementation plan, all of that will be surfaced because this component dealt with the sexual harassment policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think that, Honourable Member, maybe you, the last person before we move over to the next presentation. You may.
I think I'm partly covered by Member Mackenzie in terms of the awareness. But on my question on slide 4, or let's say, it's just a point of clarity. Let me put it like that. I just want to check whether HOD is he saying he's not aware of any managers who any managers, there's cases against any managers. Is that what he was saying when I asked the question on managers? So I just need clarity on that.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, before HOD answers, if I can restate what I heard the Honourable Member asking, were there any cases in the last year and was anyone dismissed? Were there any dismissals? I think that's what I heard in terms of the question, but maybe that was a different question, but not as far as I remember in the last year, but HOD MacDonald and Ms. Patel, who works in that component, will be able to.
No, thanks, Chair. I think
Related the powerful managers, that question was related.
it related to the question about how we deal with the powerful managers who have cases against them. What I was saying is that no, I'm not aware of any managers in the department who had cases against them who were not suspended or who were currently sitting in the department in social development. So in social development, if anyone, as I say, if anyone's got a serious case against them, then we suspend them pending the outcome of the disciplinary process, because we don't want to put the victims at further risk, and also we don't want the investigation to be compromised. But I think maybe are we talking about criminal cases? Or are we talking? Yeah, you're perhaps thinking of a different department, Chair, through you. But in social development, no, there are no managers with GBV-related criminal charges against them at this point that are still working in the department that I'm aware of. There are, in fact, I don't recall any cases in the last 10 years of that type where there was criminal cases against managers for GBV or.
I can see the heads doing that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I don't recall any in the last 10 years. Yeah.
Is in the transport department.
Yeah, not in
yours. Are you saying that?
Yes, in social development. I can only speak for social
development.
Because I know in
the transport department we do have such cases. But I'm happy, Chair, through you, that you explain if it happens in your department, that's how you are going to deal with the issue. You are going to deal differently. That's what I'm getting.
I think the issue is suspension pending the outcome.
Yes, also, it also, as I said, it does depend on the nature of the case.
Yeah.
And so on. So it has to be handled individually. And usually legal advice would be sought to make sure that we handle it correctly, because also what you have to bear in mind as well is that, sometimes you can end up with spurious cases and then you punish someone for something that they haven't done wrong, and then you end up being liable. So it's always subject to legal advice and correct procedure. But that is our principle. If someone has been charged in a disciplinary process, with something serious, we generally will suspend, because it avoids a compromise the investigation, and it also avoids victimization. And also, if someone's been criminally charged in a serious matter, then likewise we will take the necessary steps to ensure that there's no risk to employees. But that, of course, is a tricky one, because we had people charged with other things, and were advised legally that we can't act in terms of suspension or discipline. So it depends on the nature of the charges and whether it affects their capacity in the workplace. If someone's been charged, for example, with an assault matter that's disputed between two individuals, and it's a he said, she said, the advice we usually receive is you can't take disciplinary action until there's a conviction. So it will really depend on the individual. But if there's a very serious matter and we believe that the person's a risk to our employees, then suspension is the most sensible option. Alternatively, moving the person to a place where they can't have contact with people. But I mean, we unfortunately we do have a lot of suspensions in our department because of cases where there are children assaulted in our facilities, for example. So in those kind of cases where a child is assaulted by a staff member, we have to suspend to protect the children. So it does happen sometimes.
Thank you. Honourable Drinkhuis, you go ahead.
Thank you very much for your indulgence. Chair, yes, to the department also that on the sexual harassment issue, I take it that the HOD have mentioned previously that, that for the last year or the last couple of years, there hasn't been too many sexual harassment cases in the department. So, is it possible for the department to provide us, or if I could ask, those sexual harassment cases when the processes was followed, the due process when it is followed, is those processes, is it recorded, is there minutes of those processes, and how quickly can it be made available to the committee? Thank you very much, Chair.
Chairperson, we do record all of those things. Yes, the question of providing the minutes, I'm not sure. We'd probably have to get legal advice about whether that's the correct thing to do. Just bearing in mind that if complainants know that their stories can end up in the public domain, it could have quite a negative effect on people's desire to come forward. So we have to consider that as well when providing records that might disclose the details of people's complaints.
Ms. Patel, you want to add to that?
Yeah, most certainly, Chair. If I may add, the policy also, one of the principles that underlines this policy is the maintenance of confidentiality. And the policy goes to the extent also of, in a formal process, who can be present at that disciplinary hearing in order to protect the complainant. So I think we need to be mindful of that especially. And you know, the thing is, we need to create an environment where complainants feel safe enough to come forward. And if we're going to start distributing the details, it's going to make it difficult for the next person who may want to come forward, who will say, but you're not distributing all these reports. I don't want, it's hard enough to come forward without the whole world knowing what has happened to me. So I just like our honourable members to bear that in mind, please. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Chair, for that answer and that response. We do take in consideration the confidentiality, but sometimes I'm sure that sometimes politics plays out also in sometimes in the different departments. So if there's any cases, you know, where politics do play out, then does the department think that it has to be, or somehow a balance need to be struck, and it should be brought to the attention of the committee if there is any cases like that?
I'm not sure if you mean cases in the department or outside of the department, but actually, I think you grasp the moral of the question.
Yeah, look, I think there's always the public interest aspect that must be taken into consideration. I think in the case of sexual harassment incidents in the department involving officials, you know, that information we do provide, the cases that have occurred. There is information provided on dismissals and those sort of things, but we don't want to disclose the identity of the complainants. So I think that's, you know, that generally the public interest doesn't extend to the point where we subject people potentially to secondary victimization. I think that would not be a principle that would align with the public interest.
Okay, I think on that note, honourable members, it was quite a number of remarks and questions. I think for now, let's move into the next presentation, please.
Thank you, Chairperson.
I think the next presentation, GBV.
Okay, we'll go straight into it then. Ms. Wilson.
I'm not going to, it's quite a lengthy presentation, so I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty detail. I think it doesn't need any introduction about the severity of GBV in our country and also in this province. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you. I'm just not seeing the slides on the screen.
Oh, all right.
I think everyone did receive it though, so you can proceed, Ms. Wilson. I think Ms. Jamke will get it up then.
Okay, and gender-based violence, as we've seen now only on the discussion on sexual harassment, is a complex matter to address because it's not just about the individual, it's about society as a whole. And therefore, the national strategy on gender-based violence has identified 6 pillars for the focus on gender-based violence, and the provincial response to that, which is the Western Cape Government GBV implementation plan, which is the point of discussion, was developed. And as the HOD previously said, all 13 departments had key objectives to be has key objectives to be obtained in that plan. And it started in April 2020 when it was the national plan was accepted, and then last year to the latter part of last year, the work on the plan in the province started in terms of the production phase, if I can call it, the implementation phase regarding the Western Cape plan. Just to create a bit of context, there's 28,000 sexual assault cases reported by males and females at public health facilities in the Western Cape. And that can be compared to the 53,000 sexual assault cases against men and women nationally that was reported in the same period. The other one was from 2015 to 2019, and then you can see the jump nationally from 2019 to 2020. And then there's also provincially 34,000 contact crimes against women and close to 9,000 contact crimes against children. And the murder of children has been in the news quite extensively recently. There's an 8.7% increase in reported sexual assault cases. And the top 10 police stations where sexually assault has been reported is stated here in the presentation. The purpose of the implementation plan, as I said, is then to give effect to the national strategy and to strive towards the vision of having a South Africa free of GBV, directed at women, children, and LGBTQIA+ persons, through employing a multi-sectoral coherent strategy framework to ensure a coordinated response on GBV and femicide by the Western Cape Government. Simultaneously, the implementation plan addresses both the approach and activities. So it's very practical to support the sustained implementation of the National Strategic Plan. There's 4 main focus areas. All women across the life cycle, that's now from birth to in the old age, children as a specific focus area, including the boy child, LGBTQIA+ persons, and then women and LGBTQIA+ persons in the workplace. You will see in the detail of the plan, there is a specific work being done in terms of sexual harassment in the workplace, etc. The plan links to other plans in the department. It derives from the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, and the 6 pillars, which we will discuss in detail now, is there stated. Then we have the Western Cape Provincial Strategic Plan, which is from 2019 to 2024, and that then there's also a link to the Western Cape Safety Plan. And if you look at slide 6, you will see the link to other plans, which starts with a very strong foundation. So it starts with the first 1,000 days of a child and ECD, and it's also linked to job safety and jobs, and that links to the safety work stream. Then there's increasing the well-being, which is physical, emotional, spiritual, nutrition, psychosocial support across all the ages. And then specifically where GBV fits in is in terms of point 3, which is meeting basic needs and protection of human rights. And then the last one is building social cohesion and services, which is then also linked to the jobs work stream. In terms of the 6 pillars, the next slide state that 6 pillars. And if you go to slide 7, we discussed the first pillar, which is accountability, coordination, and leadership. The first one is to strengthen leadership and accountability. That's the first one. And I think most of your questions this morning has focused on that. The Western Cape government has appointed a lead minister, which is our MEC for GBV reduction. It established an interministerial committee to oversee the implementation of the plan. And it's chaired then by our minister, and it reports into the Wellbeing and Dignity work stream, which is chaired by our HOD. Mobilization and leaders and advocates for GBV reduction and in the private sector is a focused area, and civil society, and the mobilization of leaders and advocates for GBV reduction within government is the 4th point under that pillar. In slide 9 is also coordination and collaboration, but within and across government, and the GBV transversal workstream within wellbeing and dignity is that workstream that pulls all of that together. And then the third outcome of pillar 1, still under accountability and leadership, is the coordination and collaboration between government and civil society. And there the program-specific inputs of the department comes into play, which is the provincial and local VP forums to advocate and support the multi-sectoral response to GBV. So that's our external service delivery part across departments. And then in terms of pillar 2 is the prevention and restoration of social fabric, which is, I think, the most challenging part of this because it starts with childhood. It's to expand and improve upstream prevention programs, reducing social and cultural risk factors for GBV. And there are also 5 focus areas, which is the improving of public safety and reducing contact crimes in hotspot areas. That's where our local teams are focusing on, and we've indicated the areas where we focus on in terms of that in a previous slide. Then it's also reducing drugs and alcohol-related crimes, which increases risk of GBV. That's contributing factors for GBV to happen. Combating sexual harassment and GBV in the workplace within government, and we extend that to our people that we contract with when they work in our sphere. Combating human trafficking and exploitation, and sexual and reproductive health support to girls and women. And even something small like the sanitary dignity project is something that assists in that. Prevention and on the pillar 2 still is prevention in terms of boosting protective factors such as the promotion of women's rights, access in equity and empowerment, awareness and empowerment on GBV targeting specific sectors, and then strengthen programs that address the restoration of human dignity, build caring communities conducive to women's safety. And that's also something practical, for instance, is how do police stations accept a woman that reports a crime? How do courts deal with that in terms of confidentiality and dignity and so forth? In terms of pillar 3, which is the protection and safety and justice, this is more victim-centered, and in terms of the criminal justice services, that is sensitive to and meets the needs of victims of GBV. This includes specific focus on GBV responsiveness in oversight of police stations, and I think community safety plays a huge role with regards to that. Improving access and support to victims and preventing secondary victimization, our Tutuzela centers, and the whole multi-departmental interventions there. is but the example. And then, of course, the monitoring and protection of victims at court, where we follow the cases through our watching briefs and so forth. The other focus area is to prove the outcome of prosecution and of perpetrators. Again, it's the watching briefs in terms of the oversight of the prosecutions and preparing and supporting victims with court cases. Especially in terms of the at the court case, there's also the victim reports that are presented by or prepared by the probation officers that has a huge impact in the protection of victims and stating their case and the impact that had on them. In terms of Pillar 4, which is the response, care, support and healing, there we drive and promote awareness of victim support services. The publication of resources for survivors of GBV is a huge thing. We still are faced daily with victims don't know what is their options when they face this. And a lot of work in our campaigns, in social media, on the radio, and the workshops that Minister and the Premier has chaired also focuses on that. And of course, our own awareness campaigns around counselling and support for employees in the Western Cape government. We also have our EIP, which will provide also psychological sessions and therapeutic sessions of ongoing nature to our staff. In terms of the fourth pillar still is adequate spread of effective first contact or intake, care and containment points across a range of sectors and setting to maximize accessibility to victims of GBV. Again, that's at Tutuzela's centers, but it starts with school-based prevention programs where and also support programs for learners who are victims of GBV. And we see through the media, you have seen a lot of articles that our learners are subject to that. Unfortunately, also WhatsApps being distributed of videos and taken and so forth. Our health facilities, services for victims of GBV, the way they are treated within our health environment, and then also the establishment of a referral pathway for victims of GBV. And our program dealing with that plays a critical role in establishing the pathways, but also eliminating barriers. In terms of still the fourth pillar is the adequate spread of non-residential psychosocial psychosocial services for victims. Not all victims can or want to be removed from society and be placed in a safe space. And therefore, there must be services available to them where they are. Sometimes it's a long time that prevention services or support services are given while the victim is still in the violent situation until they feel safe enough and have a lot of resources in place to take the next step. And we also then through our services strengthen existing response, care and support services that are victim and survivor focused to facilitate recovery and healing, and then also the psychosocial support for survivors within workplace, that is now government workplace, as I said, with the employee health and wellness program. Still on pillar 4 is adequate spread of residential support services. I think a lot of reporting to this committee has been done on the work that has been done in this, especially in the past 2 years with the establishment of 6 new centers, especially in the rural areas, and also our intended focus of expanding in Central Karoo as well as for the LGBTQ community. Something that this province can be proud of is their work within shelters for this woman. And then in terms of economic empowerment, to empower a woman or LGBTQ person to get out of, to be economically sustainable and be able to step out of an abusive relationship. And that is then to expand opportunities for economic empowerment. Again, the assessment of Western Cape biodiversity economic strategy, it starts on a financial basis and how to stimulate women empowerment within growing green economy. We see women are quite effective within that. Also focus on women and youth empowerment through a range of initiatives that support economic development, and therefore skills development and training is a central focus for us in that, and also to address the economic and social position of women in the Western Cape. Still on that is to reduce barriers for women to become participating in economy. It's the implementation of employment equity regulations where applicable, and also the implementation of broad-based economic empowerment regulations. So something like our procurement processes and opening up to be accessible for women. The last pillar is then also the research and information systems. It's not a stagnant approach, it's a developing approach where we constantly have to look into research, what is the best ways to address it. And therefore we constantly need to develop a knowledge base on GBV to guide our interventions and the allocation of resources. We have to have a database to determine trends and plan intervention programs. And as the HOD said, Department of Health is one of the entry points for us where women get services. So their database supports us with that. And therefore employment and in the workplace, the Employer Health and Wellness Program also reports to us their analysis of employees reporting themselves or receiving support. And then also strengthen information and research within the government and to address systemic challenges to facilitate effective strategic solutions and evidence-based. So a lot of money gets wasted when you work haphazardly and not on an evidence-based manner. And then also the development of a monitoring system on our progress. And that's my task specifically. That's our implementation team to track what each department are doing, that they do what they promise to do in this plan, and that we also then constantly inform our research part of that, and then also review our plan on a regular basis. I've alluded to the departmental activities in support of interventions. All departments, provincial departments, have been consulted on and have provided input to the GBV implementation plan on their own activities. So it becomes very close and personal. All department activities are linked to the desired outcomes and interventions as detailed in this plan. And these activities include gender-focused policy implementation and reviews, awareness campaigns amongst Western Cape government staff, as well as municipalities, civil society, and our NPO partners, and then also capacity building. Activities further highlight programs offered by departments enabling coordination, a coordinated approach in the delivery of services aimed at mitigating and addressing the impact of GBV and its drivers in the province. Government as a main employee in government, in the province, must start in its own home with regards to that. And then also the Provincial GBV Strategic Plan Implementation Task Team, which I'm chairing and leading, has been established. Our first quarterly report was done by each department and good progress has been made. We also follow a continuous development approach where once a department maybe after their first try see there must be slight tweaks to their plan, can do that. So we don't have to do it only once a year. And we also then report to our MEC during the monthly meetings on a quarterly basis. And then also in terms of a well-being and dignity work stream. Now, our next step is to continue to monitor the progress in each department. As part of the basket of indicators for the wellbeing and dignity priority, and the plan to be reviewed each year, and starting with October this year. But as I said, we're already adapting our focus areas and activities as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that detailed presentation. Members, We had a number of questions about it already, but let me open it for another round. Honourable Member Ricardo.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentation. This is quite a very topical subject. Normally, I post stuff on my social media, on Facebook, on my WhatsApp status, so people to see what we're doing. And I can tell you now, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Minister, I've just got 3 replies to my WhatsApp status. And I'll just read you one of the messages, and I won't give the person's name, obviously. She said, you know, I hope something comes from this. You know, as a victim of gender-based violence, I hope something comes from this. So I asked her, you know, I hope so too. It must be reported. She said it was reported. Just going on a court case, justice systems fails victims. I agree. I said, send me the case numbers. I'll do so. Then she sent me pictures. I mean, it's horrible. The teeth were broken. My arms were broken. The pictures. I've sent it to the minister. You know, this man broke my arm, even my front teeth. And I'm not the only woman either. I had to get a metal plate in my arm, and the case always gets postponed for further investigation. She'll check the documents for the case number. And then a second to WhatsApp. This is just from my WhatsApp status. Shows how prevalent and how heartbreaking this is. And this just happened right now. So my question is around the prosecutions, because we're talking about 28,000 sexual assault cases by, you know, males and females. We're talking about provincially 34,900 contact crimes, 8.7% increase in sexual assault cases, representing an increase of 153 cases. And I'm seeing Mitchell's Plain terribly is one of the top 10 police stations. What are the convictions from your experience, and what is the problem from your experience in holding up some of these convictions? And how is there engagements with you and SAPs in place? Because I know you've got the watching brief programs to look at how these systems can be strengthened, so that women like this who just replied to my WhatsApp status with broken arms, say the court case keep being postponed. Don't, in exact words, what the justice system has failed me. You know, and there's hundreds of these cases out there, probably thousands of these cases. How do you, from social development's perspective, fix this? Because it's nice to have all your strategic interventions, your 6-7 pillars, but if there's no convictions, the best plan you put on the table is not going to help if these guys keep on hawking around every single day. And then my technical question on some of these numbers, I'm just trying to get, and because you use the word sexual assault cases, I just want to get a clear understanding in my mind. Is it rape, attempted rape, sodomy? I mean, what exactly defines all these cases, so that one knows? And does some of these cases include cases at schools, or does it exclude cases at schools? Because I know social development have their own social workers, so do you track those cases as well? And then one of my other final cases, when you look at all these numbers like Mitchell's Plain, Delft, Menenberg, the top 10 cases, once you get these numbers, then the following year, to allocate more resources in terms of social development workers, people that can provide counseling to those areas, that those numbers inform you where to do your next resource planning. That's what I'm trying to get. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think let's deal with that mouthful first.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. On the first question around the problem or the failure of prosecutions, I think the first thing to say is that the NSP GBV implementation plan that we have is for the province, for the provincial government. The SAPs have their own implementation plan for the NSP, because the NSP calls on all organs of state and in the country to develop implementation plans. So we can't create an implementation plan for the SAPs or for justice, but we do have community safety with the police oversight mandate. And so within their mandate, they are they're specifically targeting GBV cases for the watching brief. It's one of their areas, one of the things that they're bringing to the process. And also they are looking at the inspection of police stations in terms of their readiness to assist victims and the proper use of victim support rooms, and looking at where things go wrong with investigations into GBV cases. So they would probably be better placed than we are to answer that question. But I think from our perspective as social development, our role is geared towards the support to victims, as well as sometimes assisting victims with readiness to give testimony in court matters and so on. So we have some secondhand experience of what is happening with these cases, although we don't analyze them in the way that DOCS does. So I don't know whether Ms. Botha would like to just come in here and give some comments about some of the issues around convictions, and then we can return to the questions posed.
Thank you, HOD. I think when it comes to the challenges that victims are facing when they interact with the criminal justice system, it is an issue that even on our different fora, we constantly engage with, because I think all of us that have had anything to do with the justice system realize how intimidating that system is, and even more if you're a victim of gender-based violence. So what we have done as a department is at identified courts, we have partnered with our NGOs, like Mosaic, if I can use an example, who works at some of the busy courts, family violence courts, where we take the hand of the victim. We start with helping with applying for a protection order, and then journey that process then with the victim. We have seen that helps quite a lot. I think part of the frustration that happens often is that women would go and apply for a protection order, and because of then all sorts of other pressures, they withdraw the application again as well. So, but what we have seen is that if we link the victim with a court support, what we call court support official, that does minimize, that gives her the courage to continue with the case. So I think that is the one important part. But I think what we are trying to do as well with our different fora is that we constantly engage SAPS and the Department of Justice, and now also the Department of Community Safety, where we look at creating safe spaces for women, so that we do not, so that we address this secondary victimization. And how we can do that is that if you sensitize the officials or the officers that work with these victims to understand the trauma that they are going through, and we have some, anecdotal stories of how that has been working quite well in our courts. But yes, I think from DSD side, it's important for us to make sure that women know, or the victims know, that they have access to therapeutic support, psychosocial support, and sometimes just practical assistance on what would the next step be. So thank you.
Honourable Minister, to add to that.
I just want to add on to that. Just today and tomorrow, there is actually training. We have partnered with the UNODC and an NPO in Athlone. And the reason Athlone Magisterial District was chosen because the highest number of female offenders go through Athlone Magistrates Court. So the workshop for today is actually on a referral pathway workshop for magistrates. Because as the Honourable Mackenzie has said, once it gets to the police station, we then possibly would take a woman into a shelter, assist them with court readiness. But when it gets to court, we know the DNA backlogs and. So it is really around trying to create or make impact. But because the problem or the challenge is a provincial-wide, we have to work in a focused approach to try and eliminate it. But the area-based team, and there are 11 area-based teams in the metro, as I said, of which 8 have hotspots, GBV hotspots, and then each district has an area-based team. And just as an example, I was part of the Malmesbury area-based team when it got set up. When I spoke with that station commander and I asked him, what's your biggest challenge? He said, GBV, Minister. firsthand. So there is work taking place. Last week I was invited by the SAPs in Prince Albert and Klaarstrom. I also had a meeting, in fact, meeting with SAPs again on Thursday. So it has to be cascaded across the province, but I think the disconnect is not to think in silos, because what the work that we are doing here, health is part of it, DSD is part of it, education is part of it, sports, arts and culture, even Minister Mayor in agriculture is part of our group because it affects women and children on farms. So we are trying to look at it holistically, and this is why we have these work streams where we then go to cabinet and present on what is called the dignity and well-being work stream. And that covers interpersonal violence, not just gender-based violence. So I really could take you through a whole process, but we need to just, and with this Hector system that is up in 35 trauma rooms across the province, we are not reliant on stats of last year. We are getting real live statistics of murders that have happened in the last week. I can tell you in Prince Albert, there were 3 murders in that municipality in the last month. So we need to use the data. And we were yesterday in the GBV forum, when that presentation was done, many of the officials in this government said, we need to have more sessions around that kind of knowledge so we can go and be ambassadors for change and gender-based violence. So it is a whole of government and a whole of society approach.
Thank you so much.
Back to HOD MacDonald. Thank you, Chair.
Are you done?
Yeah, I think Minister spoke to it. The Hector's data, as well as the crime stats, confirm that the GBV hotspots are aligned with the murder hotspots. And so social development is part of the area-based teams, and we've been crowding in gender-based violence services in those area-based teams to support the work that needs to be done there. So the allocations are following the information on where the need is. The question about sexual assault and what defines sexual assault, that is defined in legislation. So it's things like attempted rape and so forth. But there is a statutory definition of a sexual assault. So those cases are a particular case. It's a particular kind of charge that's separate from rape. So yeah, I think, and it would include cases at schools, and we do work with the education department on supporting where they need us to support. The cases are referred also from SAPs, so whoever picks up the case, whether it's education, social workers, or whether it's SAPs, those cases then get referred to us through the victim support rooms and so on.
Thank you for that. Honourable Member Tama.
Thank you very much, Chair, and let me appreciate the responses that have been given so far. Chair, I think I agree with Member Mackenzie that the picture, as seen by the victims of gender-based violence on the ground is not as glossy as what the presentation might present. And in simple words, I'm saying the people and women in particular in the province, I don't think necessarily have hope that we are dealing with the issue of gender-based violence. And in that, Chair, I want to check as to, and partly this question might have been answered, but I want to check who are the custodians of this plan to ensure its monitoring and implementation, and whether does it form part of any measured departmental targets, so that we're able to really see the change, or how the activities of government are driven to address the issue of gender-based violence, and not it be just an issue of getting invited from time to time to particular activities of other organs, but taking charge as government had committed you know, even in the recent past, to do everything in its power to fight gender-based violence. And the last question, Chair, I think on page 19, there's a reference of economic empowerment. And I always have a problem with these beautifully, you know, written presentations when we don't really get, because what I want here is a clarity on the current deliberate actions and government plans to ensure that you realize this outcome of ensuring that women have access to resources that will enable them to make healthy choices in their lives. And I'm saying that because if you check, and we've been mentioning this for a while in the debates of this nature, if you check in the Western Cape government, because this looks like a Western Cape government GBV plan. Now, in the Western Cape government, we've been raising the issue of Mr. Batjes and the issue of Mr. Payne. But I want to take the issue of Mr. Payne for this question and around the issue of economic development, who is in the Department of Transport. His subordinate, who is the complainant, is even today sitting at home dealing with what I presume would be your trauma after this incident. But that woman is at home. Mr. Payne is still at work, and that sends a message to the victims that we're not really dealing with these issues. And the question we have been asking, which is not answered, and every time every department talks about these court watching briefs, but the question we've been asking, because we also understand and agree with even with Member Mackenzie that there is a glaring disconnectedness in the justice system in terms of responding to gender-based violence. And therefore, the question we've been asking also, which was not ever responded to, whether in debates or not by the provincial government, is as to, are the cases of Mr. Batjes and Mr. Payne part of the court watching brief? And how have we assisted through that program to ensure that these cases reach their conclusion? I once attended and met with the family of the young boy that is allegedly sorry, Chair. Yes, that's the last point. As to, I understand that also in the case of Batjes, there are issues of postponements that are happening now and again. Now the question is, are these cases monitored? What are we doing? What is this economic empowerment that we're doing, which is targeted for women in the province? Thank you, Chair. Sorry for being.
No problem. Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable HOD, you and your staff.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The custodians of the plan and to monitor its implementation is actually the Provincial Cabinet, and the custodians of the National Strategic Plan would be the National Cabinet. So the implementation plan for the province, for the provincial government, would be the Provincial Cabinet. I think the custodians of the SAPS implementation plan would be the SAPS command structure. And then overall, we report to the national government on progress with our contribution to the NSP. But our provincial cabinet reviews and monitors the plan. So we have a structure where the plan is reported firstly into the Wellbeing and Dignity priority area, which is a sub-cabinet cluster of MECs led by Minister Fernandez, and then that reports into cabinet. So that is the custodianship. In terms of targets and outputs and outcomes, I think what the honourable member was referring to, those are listed in the plan itself. I think there was a request, and I think we did submit the plan. But we can submit the full plan for that information should that be required. Likewise, with the question around the specific outcomes on empowering women, I think that is all detailed in the document, so we can certainly submit the full plan for the members to consider. And the question around the individual cases and whether there's a court watching brief on those individual cases referred to I don't have any knowledge of that, but I think the Department of Community Safety would be able to confirm, given that they have all the details of which cases they are currently tracking. So I can't give info on individual cases on their behalf. I don't have that info. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Honourable Klama, is that an old end or do you have a follow-up?
No, it's just a quick follow-up around just the last response, Chair. Is the HOD saying that they are not aware of cases of government employees that are in court and have not been suspended or any action taken on them? Is that the response that the HOD is giving? Because if the HOD is aware, as this said in the public, now it means that the Department of Social Development also should have taken an initiative in making sure that it follows up and ensure that the victims or those who might be victims of these cases are given the support necessary by the Department of Social Development.
I think you follow the
Chairperson.
More of a statement more than a question. That is all.
Yeah, no, Chairperson, I think, as I said earlier on, I'm not aware of any cases in Social Development Department. I can't speak for other departments. There may well be other cases in other departments, but where we do get requests for support to victims, we provide it in any of the departments. We have done so in the past, and we've also provided support in municipalities or in other spheres where we are asked to do so as well. So yes, but what we can't do is get involved in labour relations matters in other departments. We don't have the jurisdiction to do that. A labour relations matter in another department has to be dealt with by the accounting officer of that department in terms of the Public Service Act and regulations.
But I think understanding the honourable member's remark stroke question correctly, it is the issue about support, if requested to provide support, and the answer is yes. You do provide support. Okay. Thank you, Honourable Klama. Honourable Brunkers, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, we also thank the department for the presentation. And on slide 11, interventions, combating human trafficking and exploitation. Chair, if I could ask the department if the department can give us some statistics on the unsolved cases with regard to human trafficking for the last year. If the department could give us specific numbers of unsolved human trafficking cases, especially here in the Western Cape, and also together with that, Chair, if the department can explain to the committee that if there is a formal process and as soon as a child or a minor is reported missing and the threat of human trafficking is a reality, that what is the first call of help for that family or that near ones and dear ones of that particular child or youngster that got missing? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Brunkers. Yes, HOD.
Chairperson, I'll ask Ms. Botha just to give a brief outline of the processes around the human trafficking cases. Thanks.
Thank you, HOD. Thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. When it comes to human trafficking, we are guided by the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act of 2013. So I think what is important from that act, there's certain regulations as well. But what you're talking about reporting, it's specifically Section 18 and Section 19 that indicates that if we are aware or we suspect human trafficking, our first port of call will be SAPS. We must go to the police station because SAPS has got the obligation to do that investigation. So I think that's important. So if we suspect trafficking, we will have to go to SAPS. From there, I specifically work with adult human trafficking victims. From there, we have a provincial human trafficking task team that is operational here in the Western Cape. It is chaired by the MPA, Advocate Gary Titus from the National Prosecuting Authority. And we have a standard operating procedure. What will happen after a person has been identified from, from a SAPS official. So we have a social worker that will go out and we do an assessment. That assessment is also regularized. It's part of the regulations for Department of Social Development. It's called a Form 3. From there, we will make the call if this is a possible or suspected human trafficking victim. Then another system kicks in where we have accredited safe spaces or shelters in the for human trafficking victims in the Western Cape. That is a process where shelters had to apply, and there's certain norms and standards that must be met. And the accreditation process is driven by National Department of Social Development. The victim is then placed in this safe space. So I think, and from there, we give a certain time because trauma plays out in, different phases. We give time until we get the full story. And then the final step is a letter of recognition that is signed off by the HOD of Social Development that says we recognize this person is a human trafficking victim. When it comes to children, though, we rely very strongly on the Children's Act. So that child will be seen as a child in need of care and protection. And Ms. Goosen can maybe give some more information around that.
Yes, in terms of Section 110, it specifies the process of reporting when there's any suspicion of abuse, sexual abuse, trafficking, etc. For a person of the public, it would always be best to go to a local police station or one of the government reporting lines, hotlines to report that matter. Immediate interventions are being done. A social worker is sent out to that spot where the child is to either remove the child to do a thorough investigation or remove the child pending a thorough investigation. In terms of trafficking, because the anonymous part of that should be kept intact because it's usually part of a criminal ring. So where the child is placed will be in a registered center, but the place may be kept anonymous. We also have the ability to place a child under a different name for that period, although the records will be given to the court with the correct details. And thereafter, the short-term and long-term interventions will be determined either reunification or keeping the child in the safe space according to his or her specific needs. And also then provide the services like sometimes the children are addicted or made addicted to drugs and stuff like that, where we provide the necessary treatment programs and trauma support for that. Thank you.
HOD?
Thanks, Chair. Also, just to say, we do keep the statistics on those cases, which we report quarterly. So we do maintain statistics on human trafficking matters, whether they're solved or not. I don't think we differentiate because we're busy with the support to the victims. So the criminal matters continue and they are dealt with by the criminal justice side. Community safety may track some of those cases, but we focus on the victims from social development side. So we do keep statistics on the number of victims that we assist every quarter. Minister, did you? Okay. Thanks, Chair.
I think that is what the honourable member asked. The issue about, yeah.
The Honourable Mackenzie has alerted us to a situation, and I just want to assure him and everyone else that we are actually going to follow up and make contact. But once again, we need to respect the confidentiality because the individual is obviously suffering secondary trauma just listening to this discussion, but we will certainly engage after the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Honourable Member Winsvogel, you may.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I just want to check with the HOD or the Minister. They are saying they are giving assistance when it's asked from victims. I just want to check what type of assistance. You know, you are well aware of the pain and baadjie issues. Was assistance given to them? You are aware of the Theater School issue. Did you give any assistance to that matter? And then I love the whole of government and society approach, Minister. I think if that's the way of thinking, then I think we are moving in the right direction. But I think also we need the political will to do what we really want to do. Because you can, if that's your plan and your colleagues, that doesn't matter, different fear of government is not with you in it, then it's not going to work. So I like that approach. But I also, I support of, I agree with Member Mackenzie. Hy praat die waarheid vandag hierso. So that is actually, you know, sometimes it's so heartbreaking. Is when you see the perpetrator. I'm just thinking of the pain and baadjie issues. The perpetrator is working in the workplace. The victim is outside the workplace, is struggling, is suffering, and this perpetrator is moving on with his life. I want us to think in that way, what that victim is going through. And I'm asking myself, how do we ensure that those victims, that's why most of women are not coming out because of this behavior, of this treatment that we are getting as women. So yeah, that's the issue, Chair. Then the other thing is on page 17. Is page 17? I just want to check for you on page 17. My question there is in terms of the social workers. What is the number of GBV social workers that are in the province? And do we envisage increasing these for the year? And what is the number of vacancies for social workers in the province? Thank you, Chairperson.
Actually, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. On the question from Honourable Winsvogel about the assistance that is given to victims, it will depend on the nature of the situation, but usually the containment services are provided, and then sometimes also longer-term trauma support and counselling services are available, or even alternative accommodation in the case of victims who need to get away from the perpetrator. The thing is with these kind of matters, the ability of our department to assist is dependent on referrals being made. So we need the SAPs to, if they've got a case, or the Department of Health or a school, if they become aware of someone, they need to link them to our services. We are able to pick up cases ourselves, but of course, we are not always the first ones to hear about a matter. So the referrals have to be made. And then also victims themselves may not always be ready immediately to take up the offer of assistance. We have had cases where they wanted some time before they took up and then thereafter we were able to render services. Also to say that in the particular employee cases that were mentioned, the employee wellness program, the service provider also has psychological services that are available to employees of the province who need support. So that's also another resource. But I think in the Theawaterskloof case, I'm not sure. I can't speak off the top of my head whether the alleged victim in that instance has been referred to our services or not. But it's also, or whether the victim actually required services. Like I say, it depends on their choice as well. We don't force people to have counselling. It's not you don't do that. But the question about the GBV social workers, we have a number of GBV social workers. I think it was about 30, yeah. But that doesn't mean that that they're the only ones who are rendering GBV support services. They were specifically funded for the purpose of focusing on GBV, but all of our social workers at some time or other end up assisting with these cases one way or the other because they're on the coalface. So in the process of their work, all of our frontline social workers potentially may have to be involved in assisting with GBV at some stage or other, but those who've been trained to do trauma-informed care and trauma support services would be the ones who would assist with the more specialized requirements. That is also in addition to the NGOs that we fund to do that, which have lots of specialized skills in that area as well. So it's not only the department's social workers who provide GBV support services, it is the NGOs that we fund as well, because we fund NGOs that have shelters, but we also fund NGOs that do counselling services at, for example, the Tutazela care centres that health hosts at key hospitals, and the services there are provided by NGOs we fund. So we work in an integrated manner between justice, health, and social development and the funded NGOs. There are vacancies in the department. I don't know if we have a social worker vacancy number available immediately, but there would be vacancies. We can give those figures in writing because I think we'd have to check the latest figures so we can give you exact vacancy numbers for social workers in the department. But yeah, as I say, the social workers in the department do GBV services. The dedicated GBV social workers focus on that, but the other social workers do support as well. And then the specialized NGOs that we fund, they also have counsellors and other kinds of professions besides social workers who are also assisting with trauma support and GBV support services.
Thank you very much. Honourable Member, you're satisfied with that? You're okay? I'll say thank you. I don't see any hands. I don't see any more questions. I think it was quite a mammoth full of remarks and questions. I think that is then saturated. May I just ask the HOD ministers, your hand up? That finger, is it a finger that want to say something? I'm not sure.
Chairperson, yes, I think there's something that needs to be said. We can't just be focusing on high-profile cases where things get surfaced in the media. I would like to concur with Honourable Mackenzie. It is often the women or the children or men out there who don't have access to information. They don't have technology to assist them. So, you know, I always say gender-based violence, substance use disorder, poverty, and unemployment does not wear a T-shirt. As nie groen, rooi, blauw of geel nie. And so when we look at providing services, we are reliant on our NPO partners, on community structures. And I think what is important after this last election, with all the ward committees being set up now, that those ward committees be used. I am of the opinion a ward committee should have a GBV person on it. And we've got established GBV forums in regions that work as well, and how they all dovetail with the area-based program, which is 11 in the city and 1 in each of the 5 districts outside of Cape Town. I think that will then start to talk to the whole of society. But it is difficult. We need to first educate and share with our members and with our staff so that they in turn can go out and be ambassadors and make the detail available. You know, I go on Bush Radio with Wayne once a month or at a month during gender-based violence. But there is that wicked word called the budget. And unfortunately, this department has had to take a a cut. But as you heard what Dr. MacDonald said, we've tried to maintain and keep our GBV services going because it is a scourge. It is the second pandemic other than COVID. So we rely on our partners and especially all members in this house to assist us when alerting, not wait until the thing is on the front page of the newspaper. And I get a lot of people, whistleblowers, who contact me and say, Minister, we need you to assist us, intervene or direct us to somebody, whether we work with FCS, SAPS, NPA, whoever it might be, because in the case of GBV, wasting time, that hour could cost that person his or her life or that child. And this is why I say we need to treat it with the seriousness it deserves, but also to know that our reach as a department of just, I think, under 2,500 people with 46 offices across the province is never going to be able to be everywhere all the time. So we do rely on government, on civil society and communities to support us. Thank you, Chair.
Part of the whole of society approach. May I ask, actually, you made reference and I checked with the Secretariat and they couldn't pick it up clearly. Did you? The issue with regard to you will submit the full plan or report. What was that related to?
Yeah, I think we must have included it in a parliamentary reply. I'm getting mixed up. Yeah, there was a parliamentary question about, and we submitted the NSP in response to that. But we can submit it to Ms. Jamke
Yep,
right
please.
away. I'll send it to you now.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure about that. May I then say at this point in time, while our questions are saturated, Honourable Member, only the last one. I give you the opportunity.
Is that me, Chair?
Chairperson, yeah, sorry. I just want to check with the minister, is the officials based in your office or are they working from home? The reason why I'm asking, I'm struggling to get through to the minister, so I'm using this platform.
Okay.
So ek hoop jy gaan vir my so wegjaag nou nie. But ek het 'n probleem, Chairperson, ek het 'n brief geskryf vir die minister. Auntie Janine was amper gesteek deur haar kind 'n drug addict. Daai familie, hulle is 3 families in die Swellendam area. They are struggling to get their kids admitted to a rehab center. There's doctors' reports, social workers' reports, and last week the mom was nearly stabbed by the son. And I'm sending letters to the minister's personal assistant, or I'm not sure. And I only received a message yesterday. And now I'm asking because I asked the PA to go and look for, and she says she's not getting answer. When she called, there's no answer. They are saying they will put you through to I don't know what. But my point here is your officials based in the office of working from office or from their houses? Thank you, Chair.
Minister, please.
Chairperson, the officials rotate at this point in time or until the announcement. The staff would come in 3 days a week. The head of ministry is in the office every single day. And as I said, the staff rotate. In this instance, I will follow up with my PA immediately to see where and which email was used, because there is a specific email, dsdminister@westerncape.gov.za, where ministerial inquiries would be directed to. That email is monitored, and we do have a social worker in the office who I sometimes call at 10 o'clock at night when I get an emergency, and who follows up. So we just need to make sure, and I will certainly give Member Windvogel my personal cell phone number so that she doesn't have to go through a process, but she can actually call me or WhatsApp me directly in that case. and we can follow up after the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that at this point in time, just switch off very quickly, please, HOD. Thank you very much. Let me thank the officials, you, HOD, and also you, Honourable Minister. Thank you immensely for the manner in which you answered the questions, detailed to the teeth, for us to understand how you operate, how you do your work and so on. We really appreciate that. And also then, once again, thank you for the good work you are doing. It's difficult and we need to understand it and we need to support you as far as we can. Thank you so much. You are excused.
There's lunch, there's
If
refreshments.
there's refreshments, I was supposed to stop for 10-15 minutes for lunch, but I just said to myself, let's get the meeting done and over with. You may go and have a cup of tea and something to eat.
In the members' lounge.
Yeah, in the members' lounge. Member Windvogel? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Baie dankie.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Julle is quick, né? Yeah. Thank you, Dr. McDonald. Yes, after they left, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Okay, honourable members, thank you very much for what you have done this morning. I think it was a very good session. From my side, I have 3 recommendations, but you can add yours. Honourable Brankes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, yes, my recommendation is that if we can get the appropriate officials in our as soon as possible in the sitting with us, with the committee, so that they can provide us with the statistics which the department couldn't provide us with in terms of the human trafficking unsolved cases.
So it's going to be a briefing.
No, I think the honourable member wants the statistics, not necessary. Do you want a briefing?
Please, Chairperson.
Okay, you want a briefing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the briefing also consists of the numbers, the
statistics. That is the numbers.
Yeah, the statistics together with the contact, the details of.
Got that.
Thank you.
Similar to my one, Honourable Windvogel. Not necessarily in the department, but in the Western Cape government as a whole. Look, they have said in the department. In the department, okay. In the department.
I did not get that.
Okay. The issue for the secretariat is, if I understand the two of you.
Can you sit on your mic, members?
Sorry. No, thanks, Chair. I'm saying I remember Brankes asked a question about how many people were charged in the department. Then HOD mentioned that there is, but he can't. Remember, my question was on senior and senior management. His was generally in the social development. So if we can, he asked for that they need to provide. So if we can,
no problem.
Yeah, as a resolution.
Officials that were charged for sexual harassment.
Yeah, in the department.
Criminally. I think we said nothing.
So he was talking about also in the shelters, the safe homes, the the workers touching the children, the youngsters, that sort of thing.
So it would be number of officials that were criminally charged for sexual harassment.
Within the department, extended to our shelters and our whatever homes, safety homes and that sort of thing. Okay, and the full plan we received already, that is the statistics, that is the other one Honorable Van Vogel was talking about. And then the third one I have is the exact vacancy numbers for social workers.
Detailed information.
Or detailed information of social workers vacancies.
Detailed information on the vacancies of GBV. Is it GBV social workers?
I'm not sure if it is GBV social worker. I think it is social workers in general. I'll leave it at that, at GBV social workers. Okay. Honorable Van Vogel, you may go. That's a question.
If the victims of Member Fritz.
Ask that question. That's no problem.
Is it the, otherwise I can answer the question.
If the victims receive the necessary counsel. That's okay. Okay, I think that is it. Recommendations, remarks, questions to be followed up. I don't see any hands up and that sort of thing. So everybody is happy with it. I think it's 3, 4, 5, 6 remarks, 6 questions. That is very good. Can we leave it at that? Honorable, I see your hand.
Yeah. I'm just but worried, perhaps, but you can guide me here, Chair. I just want to check. When I was a bit confused with the presentations, but when I started, I mentioned something about a request for a meeting with the HOD on the Fritz matter. So now I want to ask if you guys, if you can guide me, Chair, on Monday on the process. Must I send in a formal request? Or how are we going to deal with this?
I think we received that because I think the remark made by Dr. MacDonald was that the whole Fritz matter is in sub judice because they are still dealing with the matter and it's in the hands of the office of the Premier. So that is why the department is not dealing with it themselves and the Premier's office are dealing with it. So we can ask that question to the Premier's office to answer.
But that's not how I see it. I want my request is that we want to meet with the HOD on the department, not perhaps if then it means there's people in the social development who's involved in the Fritz case because we want to deal with the social development. When the MEC was still, when the MEC of safety was still the MEC of social development. And you are saying this, they don't have such cases in social development. So why is it that there's a problem for him to come and appear in front of us and so that we can ask him?
But then he have said so. The question was asked if there's any such cases for the last year in social development, and he said no. You heard that?
No, but it was, we want him to come and appear, Chair, so that we can ask him as HOD of social development while Fritz was still the MEC.
Fritz, how long ago was that? A year ago, more than a year ago? I'm not so sure about that. Let me look, there's also legal issues involved. What I don't want to do is for us to jeopardize the case of those involved. I will have to ask the Premier's office to assist and some legal people to assist if we're going to follow a just course here. Because things might come out and tomorrow that appear also in the newspapers and it might jeopardize the whole issue with regard to the case. We don't know where the case is going to go to, and that is my big fear. There's no unwillingness. I'm just looking at the odds and ends around the case. I can understand the political issue. People want to have the information with opposition parties, there's no problem with. You want all the exact information. The question for me is, will the exact information, because you're going to ask the questions in the public domain, are we not going to jeopardize the case of those involved? And that is also what the senior staff identified to us this afternoon. So let me rather make a call for a quick meeting. I see the hands. Okay. Let me get a quick meeting with the Premier's office and with one or two of his legal advisors on that request, and then let me then bring back an answer to you. I'm unwilling at this point in time to say, from my side, to say yes for such a request, and I'm very specific about that. Honourable Kama, and then Honourable Wendy, please.
No, thanks, Chair. I wanted to also enter there on what Member von Vlegel was saying, because even the questions I had asked around the issue of whether are there any victims who would have reported in the department was not really answered. So the request is for the HOD to appear, not any of the victims or anyone, like how even the Premier would have appeared in the Standing Committee of Community Safety. And the matter in its entirety, Chair, it's not sub judice. It's not in front of any a court of law. The Premier is a report on the issue. It's only the Department of Community Safety that is continuing with the disciplinary processes or hearings of those officials of that particular department. Now, the question is about us holding the HOD of social development accountable for what he might know in the matters that are related to Fritz. And the HOD did say in the meeting, the procedural officer can assist you later. He did say in the meeting, he does not have a problem with coming to account. That depends on you as the chair and the committee as to when do we invite him to come and account in the committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Wendy.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, based on Member Kama's latter comment, I cannot recall that this committee has taken a resolution in that regard that the HOD would appear in front of this committee. Also, Chairperson, the entire matter has been dealt with by a different committee. Also now calling the HOD to this committee may transpire in or have other adverse effects for the exact same reason that the full report could not be disclosed. So, Chairperson, I just want to caution us to be mindful in what we are attempting to achieve by calling the HOD, but I, in essence, do not recall that this committee resolved in any way to call the HOD to account on that specific matter. And I think the matter has been dealt with by the Premier, and should members have follow-up, it should be addressed to the appropriate committee in follow-up if there are any follow-ups to be done. Thank you, Chair.
In relation to what Honourable Philander, Honourable Kama, I will do the necessary, what I've said earlier, and that is to engage the Premier and his office on this matter and come back to the members. Are you okay with that? Okay, thank you.
So, Chair, you are saying you will consult and then let us know. Yeah. Because really, what are we covering? What are we hiding? If the HOD says prepare, why are we as members saying?
We are not hiding anything.
So, no, I'm just saying, Chair, but it feels like when the comments of the statements of members.
I think you must realize, you must listen to what the HOD have really said as well. That you asked an earlier question to the HOD, and I think Honourable Kama exactly the same, about cases in his department for the last 12 months. The HOD openly said no. I think the question was asked twice, and when I asked, is that what you are saying? And he said no. So that is not hiding anything. But he did refer to cases outside of Social Development Department. That yes, and they give the necessary support. But I think your issue is specifically related to Fritz. I understand the politics around that. That is why I'm saying, let me do my homework. Let me come back to you. Okay, I will do that in the shortest period of time.
Chair.
Okay, thank you for the understanding. I think that is it. Before you go, I think 3 quick issues. The adoption of the draft committee documents. That is now the minutes of the 1st of March. You have seen that. We all have had a look at it already. That is why I'm not even referring to what's on the screen, because I read mine, I check it out. I make my own notes about it and that sort of thing. Draft minutes of the 17th of March, 2022. And can we adopt the minutes of the 1st of March? Okay, council, I nearly said councillors, honourable members. Yes, you nod with the head. And then the minutes of the 17th of March. Are you adopting? Thank you.
Move for adoption, Chair.
Adopt, Chairperson.
Yes. And then the draft committee program. You've seen the program. You've seen the outreach. It's Little Karoo and it is Stellenbosch and that sort of thing. I don't want to go into the detail.
We've seen it, Chair.
You've seen it. And,
In order, Chair.
In order. Oh, thank you. You're a lovely team. Thank you very much. I think with that, adoptions, the meeting is adjourned. And Honourable Wendy and Kama, you need to see that you come down here for your piece of sausage and for your cup of tea.
Thank you, Chair.